If you're reading this, I loved you. Chapter 1. The Blue Light and What I Did Not Say. I started this diary because memory is a terrible witness. It swears it remembers. It invents details. It swaps the order of things. The way someone rearranges furniture and claims the house has always been that way. So I write. So I do not betray you, Livia, not to time, not to my own cowardice. I write and the computer screen turns the room blue. That old monitor light, a little sick, a little intimate, and the MSN alert keeps haunting the air as if the world still believes in conversations that begin with a sound and end with promises. I was finishing college, early 2000s stuck to my skin, and everything felt too urgent to be simple. We were in a hurry to become someone. We were in a hurry to prove we were right. And I, who always believed I could organize chaos with lists and schedules, was dismantled by a ridiculous thing, almost childish, that you did without noticing. You added me on MSN. No ceremony. No pretty words. A contact request popped up on the screen, and I looked at my name, your name, the accept button, and I froze, as if a whole destiny had been compressed into that click. Pause. I remember the dusty smell of my room, old books and stale coffee, and the way my finger hesitated on the mouse. I had already seen you at a friend's graduation, a simple dress, loud laughter. I thought people like that were dangerous. Dangerous because they do not ask permission to exist. I accepted. The MSN sound came again, stubborn, and I saw your first message. You're Brad, right? The guy who gets serious even when choosing pizza. I laughed alone. It was small, but laughing alone is always a sign. A warning from the body. Careful, you're liking this. I answered slowly, as if every letter could commit me. Depends. If the pizza has a stuffed crust, I'm a happy person. Stuffed crust is a scam. I knew it. You look like someone who reads contracts. I should have left. I should have done what I always did. Let the other person's charm die in my hand, the way you close a door politely. But I stayed. I stayed because you teased me without cruelty, and I did not know yet that this was the most dangerous kind of affection. What did you see in me, Livia, besides a boy who lived as if life were a resume? I spent the night replying and thinking about what was not written. You spoke directly, but there was sadness stitched between the jokes, something that showed up and disappeared fast, like a shine that vanishes when someone turns their face. I tried to be the same as always. Measured jokes, no stepping over lines, no space for silence, because silence is territory where I do not rule. You wrote, I saw you at the graduation. You looked alone even with people around. I got angry. Not at you. At me. Because you were right. I was thinking about the future. I typed. Lie, you answered. And somehow I heard your voice inside the word. You continued. You were thinking about what would happen if you were happy. Something tightened in my chest. Not pain, but almost. And I hated how well you knew me in 5 minutes. I typed. And you. What were you thinking? You took a while. Silence. I watched the cursor blink, and a blinking cursor always looks like a held breath, a sentence that does not want to be born. The ghost question raised the emotional price of no answer, because I wanted to reach you, and at the same time, I wanted you far away. You finally wrote, I was thinking I needed to leave home. I read it 3 times. I understood what was said, but I felt what was hidden. You needed to leave home because staying hurt. Because there was a story there, old, that tightened your throat. I wrote, leaving home is easier than leaving yourself. You replied with a wow, as if I had spoken beautifully by accident, and then you attacked with humor to avoid giving me an emotional win. Look at him. The contract poet. You probably have an Orkut profile with a quote. I did. And I deleted it that same night, out of shame, as if deleting evidence could delete my need to be seen. Pause. The next day I ran into you, by chance or by the world insisting, in the university hallway. You came with a stack of books, hair tied any way, and that scent I only understood later, cheap shampoo and wind. You stopped, looked at me, and smiled like we already shared a secret. Your smile was not an invitation. It was recognition. Brad, you said, and my name in your mouth felt shorter, lighter. I answered. Livia. And I swear the word stayed in the air too long. You looked at my eyes, then at my mouth, quick, too quick to be innocent, and returned to my eyes with rehearsed calm. The tension was veiled, polite, the way things were back then, and still it was a tightened string. So you exist outside the computer, you said. I tried to look normal. I exist. On alternate days. You laughed. And laughter, in those days, did not come with filters or captions. It came whole. The ghost question changed. I wanted to ask you out. But I did not want to be the kind of man who asks someone out and then runs when he starts to care. I did not want to repeat my father's past, who loved by absence. So I stood still. You walked past me, brushing my arm. Light. But my body registered it like a stamp. You stopped 2 steps later and said without looking back, "Message me on MSN tonight. I'll be there." You left. And I stayed staring, ridiculous, as if life had just offered me an old-fashioned chance, the sort our grandparents would call courting, patience, time. I went back to my room, opened MSN, waited for the sound. It came, and I did not know that that blue alert, repeating, would be the first symbol of our story. The first object that would return later when everything was breaking. I did not write this to sound pretty. I wrote it because that day I felt it for the first time. The sense that I was stepping into something that would not ask permission to hurt. And I accepted anyway. Chapter 2: Cheap Coffee and Scribbled Napkins. We started meeting at unlikely times as if the world could not notice. That was our way of pretending we had control. You said you hated routine. I pretended I did not need it. But the truth is we fit into the gaps, between an internship interview and a boring class, between a crowded bus and a hot sidewalk. The first time I asked you for coffee, I used an excuse. I said I needed to return a book. A lie. I did not even remember which book. You agreed the way someone accepts a dare, and you showed up in a simple blouse, jeans, and that alert gaze of someone always ready for abandonment, and therefore trained to read signs before everyone else. The coffee came from a machine, bitter, and the foam looked like a badly made promise. We sat by the window. The glass was smeared with fingerprints. The street looked like a cheap movie, but it was our street. You stirred sugar slowly, as if you were stirring thoughts, and asked, "Are you always this serious?" I answered, "Depends on the risk." What risk? I could have said the truth. The risk of liking you. But I said, the risk of spilling coffee on my clothes. You laughed. And again, laughter caught me unprepared. You were there in front of me, and I did not know what you wanted from me. A romance. A pastime. A fight. I began to watch you with an attention that was not only desire, it was survival. You talked, and behind what you said there was a need. I saw it in the way you adjusted your sleeve, in the way your eyes searched for exits, as if any closeness could become a trap. You said, "I'm afraid of people who promise." On the surface, a casual line. Underneath, a confession. Tactically, a warning. I felt the urge to promise just to contradict you, to win you, to prove I was different. But I did not want to win you. I wanted to stay. So I answered, "I'm afraid of people who disappear." You stopped. The silence between us became solid, as if it could be touched. You looked at me as if I had stepped into a room in your house without permission. You said, "Then we're even." And you smiled, but the smile was a fast mask. You pulled a napkin and started scribbling. Scribbles from an anxious person, lines back and forth, as if drawing could avoid feeling. I watched your finger hold the pen, short nail, slightly dry skin. Details. I kept details because deep down I already knew time is a thief. The subject shifted to the future. It always does. When you are newly graduated, everything is future, and the future is an empty room you try to decorate before you walk in. You said you wanted to work in communications, that you hated being trapped, that you wanted to travel. I said I wanted stability. You made a face of disgust. Stability is a prison, you said. Prison is not having a choice, I answered. You tilted your head, considering the sentence. Then you did something that dismantled me. You touched, very lightly, the tip of your finger to my hand, minimal contact, almost accidental, but intentional enough to become heat. Veiled. Discreet. The way people used to be when mystery still had a place. You said, "You have hands that hold things." I swallowed. I answered, "And you have hands that run." You laughed, but sadness came with it. "I do run," you admitted. From what? You looked out to the street, shrugged. From becoming like them. I knew without you saying. Your parents. Your past. The home you wanted to leave. I did not push. I learned tea. That day that pushing you was a kind of violence, even if gentle. When I left, you stood too. At the door, sunlight hit your lashes and you blinked like someone holding back tears. You said, "I like talking to you." Simple, but with layers. On the surface, praise. Underneath, a request. Tactically, a test. I answered, "Me too." I wanted to say more, that with you my chest felt less tight, that the world felt less like a task and more like a home. But I said only what fit. You turned your face and left space between us. 2 centimeters. Exact. And I felt the air there vibrate, as if a kiss was possible and forbidden at the same time. You did not kiss. I did not kiss. The tension stayed hanging, and that was worse and better than any kiss. You stepped away and said, like tossing a coin into a well, "Leave me a scrap on Orkut. I want to see if you're in some community for annoying people." Orkut was the social network everyone used back then, and scraps were public messages, little performances of affection. I answered, "I have several." You laughed and left. I went home, and before sleeping I pulled the scribbled napkin from my pocket and put it in my backpack, as if that paper could become proof. Proof of what? That this happened. That you existed in my life before I became a man who writes to avoid going insane. I opened MSN that night. The sound came. And I understood you were entering. Slowly. And I was already invested enough to stop pretending it was just coffee. Chapter 3. Fresh paint and the dust of beginnings. The first apartment we tried to put together was not ours. Almost. It belonged to a friend who had rented it and needed help. But we chose to believe it was a rehearsal. And rehearsals are sometimes truer than the stage. Boxes everywhere. Fresh paint clinging to the air, a strong smell, intrusive, like a beginning that does not ask permission. You walked in and opened the windows. "I hate the smell of new things," you said. I answered, "I like it. It feels like you can start over." You looked at me with a mix of irony and tenderness. "Brad, you're so proper it makes me want to mess things up just to see your face." I made the face. You laughed. We spent the day building furniture, fighting screws, trying to understand instructions, and in that ridiculous process of fitting wood together, we fit. I wanted to know if you would stay. Not with me that day. That was easy. Stay in the real sense. Stay when the charm ended. Stay when you saw my habits. Stay when you realized I was afraid of losing. You built the bookshelf with comic aggression, as if breaking a piece was a way to defeat something old. I said, "Slow down." You answered, "Slow is for people who have time, and you don't." You paused for a second, quick, and went back to work. "I have time for what matters." My chest tightened. I wanted to ask if I mattered. I did not. I learned not to ask, because asking is exposure. And I was good at not being exposed. You sat on the floor, sweaty, hair loose, and looked at me with those eyes that always measured distance to pain. "Have you ever lived alone?" you asked. "No." "Then you don't know what it's like to come home and have no one ask you anything." I said, "I know what it's like to come home and have no one notice." You went quiet. It was the first time we recognized ourselves in each other's wound, not in each other's mask. At the end of the afternoon, when the shelf stood upright, crooked but upright, you got up and did a ridiculous victory dance. I laughed. Loud. And for me, loud laughter was almost a sin. You looked at me like you had won something rare. "There," you said. "I made you laugh." I answered. It wasn't hard. You came closer. Paint smell, dust, warm skin. Veiled. Discreet. But the space between us shrank. You said low. It was. I felt your gaze drop quick to my mouth in return. I felt my body react before I decided. I turned my face a little, so it would not look like I wanted it. Coward. You raised your hand and touched my face lightly, like testing temperature, and I froze. My heart sped up. I wanted to kiss you. I wanted to stay in that fake apartment, that rehearsal life, and pretend the world did not exist. You came closer. 2 centimeters. You smiled like you knew. Then you stepped back, like you feared your own desire. "I need to go," you said. And anger rose. Not at you. At how life always seemed to take things the second I almost believed. "It's fine," I said, too dry. You noticed. You always noticed. You replied, equally dry. "Okay." And the silence grew. You grabbed your bag, opened the door, and before leaving you stopped. You did not look at me. You looked at the floor, as if speaking while looking hurt more. "Brad," you said, and my name became heavy. I'm not good at staying. I swallowed. I wanted to say I was not either, but I said, I'm not good at asking. You turned and finally looked at me. In that look, we made a pact without words. You came close again, not to kiss. You pressed your forehead to mine, fast, and breathed. I felt your breath on my face. I felt the world shrink. You whispered, then don't ask. Just keep going. And you left. I stayed there, the apartment full of paint smell, and felt a joy that carried an old sadness, as if the body knew the best things are born already threatened. I gathered tools, grabbed a cloth, wiped dust off my arm. When I stood, emptiness hit my stomach. I leaned on the wall. I saw you in my head, sitting on the floor, and fear rose. Fear with no explanation. Not yet. That night I wrote in the diary. Livia said she is not good at staying. I said I'm not good at asking. We are learning. And mid-sentence my pen failed, and I started again, as if starting again were possible. Chapter 4. Flash and the photo no one talked about. The camera was disposable. One of those you buy, use, and take to be developed, as if time needed a physical step to become memory. You found it in a drawer and said we had to record life for real, because back then phones were for calls and short texts, and photos were a ritual. I pretended indifference. I was liking your habit of turning small things into meaning. The party was for a friend. Music loud, too many people, sweet perfume and sweat. You pulled me into a corner, away from the speakers. You look like an old man, you said. I like listening to people talk, I answered. Lie. You liked observing so you don't have to commit. I laughed. You had that annoying talent. You knew me quickly. Were you with me there, or were you only in the world, using my presence as a temporary shelter? You danced without pressing too close. Body near but polite, veiled, as if we still did not have the right to be intimate in public. I wanted to hold your waist. I did for a second. You stiffened. Not rejection. Fear. You smiled to disguise it. You don't like parties, you asked. I answered. I like you. You swallowed. And switched topics as always. Let's take a photo. You raised the camera. The flash exploded. White light cut the dark. For an instant I saw you as if you were someone else, more fragile, more tired, and my chest tightened. You joked about the photo we could not see yet, and I thought how cruel it is to depend on development to know what stayed. Later outside, you lit a cigarette I did not know you smoked. I got annoyed. You smoke, I asked. Only when I'm scared. I wanted to take it from your hand. Control. My old vice. I held back. Scared of what? You shrugged. Of liking. The line hung heavy. You looked at me. The flash still felt like it lived in my eyes. You said, when I like someone, I get stupid. I hate getting stupid. I answered. I like when you get stupid. You laughed, but your eyes went wet. You put out the cigarette. I moved close without touching, only heat. Veiled. Tension living in the unsaid. You said low. I want to trust. I answered lower. I want you not to run. And there on some sidewalk with cold wind and party noise behind us, we stood still as if one more step could change everything. You lifted your face slowly. I lifted mine too. 2 centimeters. Always 2. For the first time you did not pull away. You did not kiss. You touched your nose to mine lightly and laughed, mocking the drama. You look like you kissed like you're signing a contract, you said. I answered. And you look like you vanished the next day. You smiled. Then don't give me a reason. We went back inside. No kiss. The full promise living in the air. At the end of the night on the bus, you rested your head on my shoulder. I felt your weight, light, and felt useful in a strange way, like I was holding the world in the right place. You fell asleep. I stayed awake. I watched you. Thought about the camera. Thought about the photo that did not exist yet, but already was memory. When I got off, you woke and asked, Brad, if one day I get sick, will you leave? I froze. Absurd. And at the same time, the first true question. I answered, I won't. You closed your eyes again. As if the answer was medicine. I went home carrying a fear I could not name. And I wrote, Livia asked if I would leave if she got sick. Why did she ask? That. And why did my answer come so fast, as if I was already paying an old debt? Chapter 5. The envelope and the number they tried to put on me. I always thought tragedy was loud, that it arrived with sirens, that someone warned you. But no. Sometimes it arrives on paper, on an envelope, on a stamp. And the only sound is the world going on. I went to the doctor alone because that is who I am. I try to protect others from what I do not understand. I had been tired, a cough that would not go away, a strange weight. I blamed stress, internship, bad sleep. I carried my whole life on my back and called it youth. The office smelled of alcohol and too much clean. The plastic chair stuck to my leg. I stared at a framed lake on the wall and thought how offensive it is to hang pretty landscapes where bad news lives. The doctor was direct. No drama, no tenderness. He said words I did not want to know. Cancer. Advanced. Prognosis guarded. Then he tried to be gentle with what has no gentleness. He talked about time, months, statistics, probabilities. As if I were an equation, I left with an envelope in my hand and the sense the world had shrunk. Pause. How do I tell you this? I went home, opened MSN. The sound came. I stared at the chat window like it was a door that, if opened, would never close again. You messaged first. You vanished. Are you okay? I typed. I'm fine. A lie. You replied, I hate when you lie politely. I felt anger and relief. You saw me. I typed, I need to see you. You answered. Now, you were always like that. Direct. Like time was something we could not waste. I went. We met on the bench in the small square near your house. Late afternoon. The sky had that gray Sao Paulo sadness, like the sun did not dare be too beautiful. You arrived, looked at me, and knew immediately. Brad, you said. Your voice became smaller. I'm sick, I said. Simple. Raw. You went still, as if the language had changed. I handed you the envelope. You opened it. Read. Your hands started to shake. You closed your eyes, breathed deep. When you opened them, anger came. Not at me, at the world. This is wrong, you said. It can't. I tried to speak. You raised your hand. Don't talk yet. I don't want to hear the part that kills. My chest tightened. You continued. What did he say? How long? I did not want to say. I wanted to protect you from the number. Because numbers become sentences. I said, it's not certain. You grabbed my arm. Hard. Brad, say it. So I said it. 6 months. Maybe less. Silence. Absolute. The square vanished. There was only your face. You did not cry. You turned white. And that was worse. Because crying is at least life. You breathed like swallowing glass. Then, unexpectedly, you smiled. A crooked smile. A defiant smile. Then we have 6 months, you said. I blinked. For what? To live. You said live like pointing a weapon. You pulled my hand, pressed it to your mouth, fast as if kissing the back of my hand was allowed when a real kiss still felt forbidden. Veiled, but incendiary. You're with me, you asked. 3 layers. On the surface, simple. Underneath, a need for safety. Tactically, a nod. I answered, I am. And in that moment, I learned something. I was more afraid of losing you than of dying. You stood. Pulled me with you. Let's walk, you said. We walked without destination. You spoke fast. Travel lists. Things to do. As if life were a checklist and if you organized it, it would obey. I let you. Because I knew that defense. It was mine. Control. You stopped suddenly and looked at me. Have you written about me? I swallowed. I have. About what? I could have lied. But I had just been handed a sentence. Sentences change courage. About how you make me feel more human than I am. You went quiet. Then sadness appeared. It touched your face like shadow. You said, then write everything. Everything. I want to exist on paper. That night, I truly began this diary. I wrote your full name. I wrote the envelope. I wrote the number. I wrote a line I did not know was prophecy. If I die first, let it be recorded that I was loved. And I stopped. Because my hand was shaking. And on the other side of the page, I felt, like cold, the question I did not dare ask. What if you die first? Chapter 6. A hospital wristband and a summer plan. You turned my diagnosis into a project. Beautiful and absurd. Like trying to hold water in your hands. I let you, because I wanted to watch you fight. You made a list in a notebook. Things to do before the end of the year. Beach. A concert. Eat a street fair pastry and laugh at annoying people. You wrote kiss in the rain and crossed it out, as if it was silly. I saw. I pretended I did not. Veiled. We started treatment. The hospital had a smell I will never forget. Alcohol in waiting, and the chairs were full of people with tired eyes, like the whole world was paying a bill. They put a wristband on my arm. My name. My number. Identity reduced. You looked and got angry. I hate this, you said. This what? Turning you into a file. I tried to joke. At least now I have proof I exist. You did not laugh. You held my arm and traced your finger over the band like you could erase what was written. Pause. You cared for me with an intensity older than us, as if you were trying to save someone from the past. I wanted to know who. Who you had lost before me to make you like this. But I did not ask. I was afraid to open a door you had locked for survival. In the corridor, a doctor spoke to me. You were beside me. He said the tests were showing something surprisingly promising early in treatment. Promising. A dangerous word. You brightened for a second. Then, out of nowhere, you pressed a hand to your chest. A quick gesture. Almost nothing. You hid it. I noticed. I always notice now. Are you okay? I asked. You answered fast. I'm fine. A lie. Your breathing was short. You drank water. Smiled. I'm just nervous. I wanted to push. But I kept quiet. We left the hospital and got sandwiches, like the world allowed normal life. You ate slowly, watching the street. Wind moved your hair. I watched you. You said, you know what's ridiculous? What? I've spent my whole life thinking nobody stays. And now I'm here and I don't know what to do with this need to stay. Joy with sadness inside. I answered, staying is scary too. You laughed. A short laugh. You talk like you've done it before. I thought of my father. Promises. I said, I'm learning with you. You went quiet. Then you touched my hand under the table, hidden, like affection needed discretion to avoid punishment. Veiled. But real. You asked, Brad, if you get better, will you leave? I almost laughed from nerves. Why would I? Because a lot of people leave when fear ends. When they don't need to anymore. I understood. You were not asking if I would leave you. You were asking if I would leave love when love stopped being an emergency. I answered, I don't know how to leave. You finally smiled. And I saw something rare. Trust. That night in your room, we lay side by side. No sex, no rush. Just skin near. Just warmth. As if the body asked for presence before anything else. You turned and rested your hand on my chest, listening to my heart, and I rested my hand on your ribs, feeling your breath. You whispered, I like that sound. Which? Your heart. It sounds committed. I laughed low. You laughed too. The laughter became silence. You turned serious. I have something too, you said. My blood went cold. What? You hesitated. I saw the cursor blinking, like in our first days, but now it was on your face. Something with my heart. Since I was born. It's nothing. Nothing, you said, as if nothing exists in a heart. I wanted to sit up, take you to a doctor, control. But I forced myself to breathe. Why didn't you tell me? I asked. You answered simply, because I didn't want to be weak in front of you. I almost cried. I pressed my forehead to yours, like in the paint apartment. And I whispered, you were never weak. You closed your eyes. And I felt that while I fought my ending, another ending was hidden in you, silent, polite, waiting. That night I wrote, she has a heart problem. She says it's nothing. I'm afraid of something I cannot name. Chapter 7. The Nokia ringing at the worst moment. The ringtone on my Nokia became an enemy. Every time it rang, I felt the floor slide away. Always at the worst second, as if life had cruel humor. You hated phones. You said calls were invasions. I liked them. Calls were certainty. We had our first real fight on a dull Tuesday after an appointment. The doctor said I was responding well. Too well for someone with a number on his forehead. You should have celebrated. But you went strange. I left the office with hope. You left with fear. Why can't you accept good news? We walked in silence to the car. I tried. Livia, this is good. You answered. It is. A dead voice. I pushed. Then why are you like this? You stopped on the sidewalk. Looked at me. Anger rose like fever. Because now I'll have to live with you, she said. I was hurt. You say it like it's punishment. I say it like it's real. Because I don't know how to do this. Do what? Be happy without thinking it will end. I reached for your arm. You stepped away. Veiled, but sharp. Then the Nokia rang. I answered. My mother worried, asking about treatment. I spoke fast, calming her. When I hung up, you stared at the ground, hand trembling. Are you okay? I asked. I'm fine. A lie. The fight started small and grew, because fights are never about the surface. I said, you don't have to carry this alone. You said, I've been carrying everything since forever. Then let me carry it with you. You laughed, bitter. You talk like it's romantic. It's not. It's heavy. I felt anger. I know it's heavy. I'm sick. You lifted a hand like I had hit you. And I understood. Your wound was not my cancer. It was the fear of depending. Depending and being abandoned. You said low, I can't stand needing. I answered low, I can't stand watching you pretend you don't. You turned your face. What do you want me to be? A good girl crying. I want you honest. You went quiet. The emotional cost was too high. We stood on the street with people passing, and still it felt like only we existed and our inability to love without armor. You vanished for hours. No MSN. No answer. I walked the city like an idiot, looking for you in places you did not even go. I came home with my throat closed. In the trash, I saw a medicine box. A name I did not know. I grabbed it. Read. Heart. Arrhythmia. Control. I sat on the floor. Pause. When you came back, it was night. You entered without looking at me. I stood. Where were you? I asked. I went to breathe. Breathe where? You finally looked at me. Eyes red. But no tears falling, because you always held them back. I went to the hospital. My body went cold. Why? You shrugged, trying to sound casual. I felt pain. I went to check. You opened your bag and pulled out a crumpled envelope. Test results. I could barely take it. You said, it's nothing. A lie. I opened it. Read. I did not understand everything, but enough. You had a problem. It was getting worse. I looked up. Why did you hide it? You snapped, defensive, because it was mine. And what am I? No answer. I saw your fear. Fear of being cared for. Fear of owing. I breathed. Spoke slowly. I don't want to control you, Livia. I just want to know you whole. Even the ugly part. You started to cry. Finally. Silent crying. Crying from someone who holds it for years and releases for 1 second. I held you. For real. Bodies pressed. No rush. No explicitness. Only the tension of two people who need each other and hate it. You whispered. I'm afraid of dying. I answered. Me too. And in that embrace, I felt the terminal diagnosis was not only mine. It was a shadow over us. That night I wrote, life did not warn me that illness could live in you too. I thought I was the only one with a deadline. I was wrong. Chapter 8. Ink on my hand and the line I crossed out. My treatment improved. I hated that sentence because it came with hope, and hope became dangerous. Doctors started saying response above expectations. I saw you smile. Then I saw you fear that smile. As if smiling invited tragedy, you started getting more tired. Stairs became obstacles. Walking became effort. You said it was nerves. A lie. I wrote more. The diary became how I held you without trapping you. One day ink stained my hand. I stared at the blue stain like it was blood. If I get better, will I lose you? I tried to talk. You were in the kitchen making coffee. Machine coffee now felt like luxury because we learned to love the basic. I said, you need to take care of yourself. You answered, look at you. You became a doctor. I tried to laugh. Couldn't. Livia. You stopped, looked at me. Brad. My name was a warning. I said, you're worse. You shrugged. I'm alive. That's not an answer. You came closer. Touched my face. Veiled. Affection as an escape from the subject. I don't want everything to become illness, you said. But it's becoming that. You closed your eyes. Breathed. and I felt your fear leak into the air. At the next appointment, I went with you. I walked into the office like a war. The doctor spoke calmly, explained, said your condition could worsen, risk, monitoring, possible surgery. You stayed steady, but your hand trembled in your lap. I held your hand. You tried to pull away. I held gently, no force, so it would not become control. Veiled. You looked at me with anger and gratitude mixed. Later in the corridor, you broke. I hate this, she said. I hate being the sick one. I answered, you're not the sick one. You're you. You laughed, bitter. Pretty. But it doesn't change that I can die. I couldn't breathe. Pause. I said, I thought I would die first. You looked at me. And in that look, I understood. You thought so too. It had been a silent pact. You would care for me until the end. Then, free, you would survive. Now the order was threatened. And the mind hates when order changes. That night you asked me to read the diary. I read a few pages. You listened like it was music. When I reached a part where I had written, if I die first, you stopped me. Did you cross it out? You asked. No. Cross it out. I blinked. Why? Because I don't want to hear you talk about the end like it's yours. I want you to talk about ours. My throat closed. I took the pen, crossed the line out. The ink smeared, stained my hand again. You ran your finger over the stain and smiled. Now you're marked, you said. I laughed small. Then you pressed your mouth lightly to my cheek. Not a kiss on the lips. Almost. A promise. Veiled. You whispered. If you stay, I stay too. I wanted to believe. I did. But I saw in your eyes a tiredness that was not only emotional, it was physical. And when you slept, I wrote. I crossed the line out. I stained my hand. And I'm afraid I'm writing to keep you here when the world may have already decided to take you. Chapter 9. Rain on the windshield and her last sentence. The worst part of goodbye is that it does not look like goodbye. It looks like Monday. It looks like any morning. It looks like normal life until it is not. You woke up short of breath. Tried to joke. I'm getting old, you said. I did not laugh. I got up. Helped you sit. Your skin was cold. I grabbed a coat. Called a cab. You said you did not need it. A lie. Rain started on the way. Water hit the glass. The wipers moved back and forth, hypnotic, stubborn, like a mechanical heart. Am I going to be able to save you? At the hospital, everything was fast and slow at once. They put you on a gurney. I stayed beside you, holding your hand. You looked at me and tried to smile. Don't make that face, you said. What face? The face of someone trying to organize the world. I almost cried. I don't know how to do anything else. You squeezed my hand. Weak but present. Veiled, you said. Then organize. But let me feel. The doctor spoke to me aside. Complication. High risk. Urgency. I heard it like distant water. I went back to you, paler, breath short. I sat close. You asked. Read. Read what? The diary. I froze. Now. I pulled the notebook from my bag, bent like an organ of mine. Opened to a random page. My voice failed at first. Then it found rhythm. I read about MSN, about cheap coffee, about paint, about the envelope. I read and felt each word was a rope trying to tie you to the world. You closed your eyes, listening. Your hand squeezed mine lightly. For a moment, I saw peace on your face, like pain had found meaning. I stopped reading when I realized I was crying. You opened your eyes. Keep going, she said. So I did. Hours later, in a brief window, you were lucid enough to speak. You pulled my hand closer. I leaned in. You whispered, Brad, I'm here. I know. Pause. You breathed with difficulty. Then you said your last sentence. Simple. No poetry. No dramatics. Like everything true. Don't let anyone shrink what we were. I closed my eyes. Pressed my forehead to your hand. Promised without saying. You closed your eyes. Not like sleeping. Like letting go. The monitor started signaling. People ran. I stood still, because sometimes the body refuses to believe. I heard words I do not want to write. Time. Procedures. Death. The world stepped away. like I was underwater. I did not scream. I did not fall. I sat holding your hand with no answer, as if my insistence could convince you back. And then I understood. My terminal diagnosis was a comfortable plot. In it, I was the protagonist who dies. In it, I could spare you. In it, I could spare Troll the order. Life refused. Life did the unthinkable. You went first. I went home with the diary pressed to my chest. The rain kept falling. The wipers kept moving. And I wrote, hand shaking. She died. And I'm still here. And the question left is cruel. What do I do with the time left in me if the time was supposed to be yours? Chapter 10, Yellowed Tape and the Ending No One Heard. After you died, I became an old-fashioned man. A man who walks slowly, who avoids noise, who speaks little. I thought grief would be an explosion. But grief is routine with no meaning. I woke up the next day and the world was still there, insolent, people going to work, buying bread, laughing on the bus, like nobody knew you were gone. I tried to keep treatment. Doctors said I was stable. Stable. As if stability were praise. I was alive. And I hated it. Pause. I kept writing. Because I promised. Because you asked me not to let anyone shrink what we were. If I did not write, the world would turn you into a footnote. A girlfriend who died young. A sad story. I refuse. You were my center. So I write so it stays clear, even if it hurts. If I finish this diary, do I lose you for good? I started speaking to you inside the text. Writing as if you could read, as if reading were a way of existing on the other side. I wrote your laugh and your rule that stuffed crust is a scam. I wrote the way you slept pressed against me, like I was the only home possible. I wrote how you feared meeting, and how even so you stayed. The diary became a room where you still breathed. But the body remembers reality. I got sick again. A stubborn fever. A tiredness that was not only sadness. The doctor spoke of complications, aggressive return, things I did not want to hear. I left and went to the same square where you opened the envelope of my diagnosis. Sat on the same bench. Looked at the sky. Laughed alone, ugly laughter because life has an irony no writer could invent without being accused of exaggeration. I went home and tried to pin you down in details. I found the disposable camera we never developed, forgotten in a drawer. I had it developed. Days later, I picked up the envelope of photos, opened carefully, and saw. In one photo outside the party, before the kiss that never happened, you were looking at me with something on your face I did not notice then. Fear, not fear of me. Fear of time. Like you already knew. I stared a long time, and understood you always carried your shadow. You just learned to dance with it. I picked up the diary and wrote. You already knew you could die. That is why you asked me to write everything. That is why you wanted to exist on paper. You were preparing your own staying. And I was the instrument. It broke me and honored me at once. In the last week I had strength. I finished the diary. I wrote until my hand hurt. Until breath ran out. I wrote, and in the end I taped the last page with yellowed old tape, the kind you find in a mother's drawer, because I could not bear leaving the sheet loose. Loose paper looks like abandonment. I promised myself someone would find it. Someone would need to know. I closed the diary and placed it in the drawer. I lay down, stared at the ceiling. For the first time since you left, I spoke out loud to nobody. Livia, I'm tired. The room was silent. No MSN alert. No Nokia ring. Only the distant noise of the city. I closed my eyes. I thought about how things used to be, when love was more gesture than speech, more presence than performance, and it hurt to think we had little time, but we had the kind of love that does not need explanation to be big. I did not write again after that. This is the last entry. But it is not the end of the story. Because I need you to know, reader, listener, whoever holds this notebook, I'm not here anymore. I went too. Not long after her. I did not last, and maybe that is unfair to the living, but I no longer wanted to bargain days with a world without Livia. I left the diary where someone would find it. And if you're reading, you're holding the only thing I managed to do right. Love. And record it. In the end, that is the most a man can offer when time decides it is the owner.